This week, we are going to take a look at modules in Node.js. Modules are an important concept to understand when working with Node, so we will tackle it as our third tutorial on Node. Welcome to another tutorial from All Things JavaScript, where we help bridge the gap between novice and expert. If you haven't viewed the first two tutorials about getting started in Node, I will link to the playlist in the description. Now, modules is an important concept in Node, but not something that is understood well by users of vanilla JavaScript. Most likely, that is because JavaScript did not provide a built-in way to create modules until ES6. Prior to ES6, the module pattern was used, which takes advantage of first-class functions and closure to create modules. Though the mechanics are different, the concepts are similar to modules in Node. If you'd like to review those concepts, I will link to them in the description. Now, first, let me briefly introduce modules, and then we will create a simple module. So first off, a module in Node is a separate JavaScript file. And the purpose of that separate JavaScript file is to group related functionality. So say you have some JavaScript code, some functionality that you want to reuse or you want to structure within the project you're working on. A module is used for that. You create a new JavaScript file and you put that code in that JavaScript file. Now, the advantage of a module is it won't interfere with your other code. It is a separate scope entirely. So you can create a variable in your main.js file, and if the same variable is used in one of your modules, they're not going to conflict. They have a separate scope. Modules are reusable and shareable, and that's how it can help you structure your code. And as we've mentioned, it is a great way for structuring your code. It is a tool that is provided in Node to help you do that. Now, the key commands for working with modules are module, exports, and require. Now, these three commands are not a part of JavaScript. These are added as a part of Node. So the Node application that gets installed contains these commands and allows you to use them to work with modules. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at creating a simple module so you can see the process. So first off, here is my main file that I want to use in Node. Let me just first do a console.log statement indicate in app.js, just to indicate that's the file that's currently running. So we can save that, and then if we want to run that in Node, we pull up the terminal, and then we can type node space app.js, because that's the path I'm in. I'm in the path where app.js exists. Now, as a shortcut, we could simply type node space app. It knows that we are trying to load a JavaScript file, so it doesn't need that extension. And there we can see the console log statement in app.js. All right, so now let's create a module. So this is a separate JavaScript file. Let's say I want a module to control everything I'm doing with names. I work with names a lot in this code for some reason, and I have a bunch of different functions or whatnot that allow me to work with names, and I'm going to put them in a names module. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to name it, save it as names.js. Now that file is in the same directory as app.js. They're located in the same place. All right, so let's set up some code in this file. Add my use strict variable, and then we will create a function. And this is going to format names, and so we'll be able to pass a name into this function that's listed as last name, first name, and it will format it first name, last name. We'll use the replace function, and we'll also use a regular expression to do that. Basically what this regular expression is going to do is it's going to match the parts of the name, the last name, comma, first name, and then because it's using capturing groups, it's going to use those groups to reverse that. If you haven't done a lot with regular expressions to this point and you'd like to dive into them more deeply, I do have a course on regular expressions, and in the description section I have all my courses with a discount on Udemy. Alright, so we're reversing the name here. These are the groups we're referring to. And we're just reversing the order, first name, last name. And so that will allow us to switch it. That's one of many ways to switch the order of a name. Now, this is its own JavaScript file. So I could call this function from inside this file. Let me just do that. Format name, and I'm going to pass in a name, my own name. And then I'm going to save that. Now, let's see what happens when we run app.js in Node. So we'll do node.app. Basically, all we get is the console log statement from app, and that's what we should expect. Even though name.js is in the same directory, we're not telling it to do anything with name.js. So how do we go about doing that? How do we include name.js with our main code file? How do we begin using it? Well, that is where the require command comes into play. So we can require that file, meaning we need it for what we're doing. We can require that file, and all we pass to require is a path to the file. So in this case, it will be / and then names.js, like that. Now that makes that file available inside of app.js. Now let's see what happens. Let's see if it loads it and invokes it, causes this code to execute. All right, so node app again. And yes, we can see that Stephen Hancock is displayed first name, last name, and then the console log statement from app.js. So the name is displayed first because if we look at this, we're requiring it before we do the console log statement. And so that's why it is showing up first. Now, let's go ahead and comment out this portion here. We don't want to be calling it from inside this file. We want to be able to use this function as a part of our other code. This is going to be a library of sorts, a library of functionality around names. And therefore, we're setting it up as a module. So we're going to remove that. Let me save that. And now let's call it from inside here. So I'm going to call the format name function. Let me first set up a variable that has a name in it. I'll use my name again. There, we got that variable. And then down here, I'm going to call that function. And we're going to pass in name. See, format name, make sure we spelled it correctly. Format name, yep. So let's save that and let's see what happens. Now think about this for a minute. Is this going to invoke that function which exists in this different module? Well, let's find out. So node app. Basically, we get an error here, reference error. Format name is not defined. So our app.js file cannot find format name. And that's a good thing. That is a good thing. That is the beauty of modules, is that I can define things in this module file, and I don't have to worry what variable names I use or anything like that. They're not going to conflict with what I do in my main file. So that's a good thing it cannot find that. These are different scopes. But we need to be able to use these elements that are part of names.js. So how do we go about doing that? Well, that's where module.exports comes into play. So we can have a lot of code in this module, and we can then choose which code we want to make available outside the module, which things we want to make public. So let's use module.exports, and we're going to set that equal to format name. So we're going to make format name available outside of this module. So let me save that. Now we need to go back to app.js, and we need to do something with the require statement. Not only do we require it, but with module.exports as a part of that, this becomes the variable that is returned with require. So something's going to be returned with require. Something from module.exports is going to be returned. And that will allow us to use it inside of app.js. So let's go ahead and assign what is returned to a variable within inside of app.js. So let me do let format nm. Notice I'm using a different variable. I could, if I wanted to, use format name, the exact same variable. Once again, they're different scopes, so they're not going to conflict. So it really doesn't matter what I use here. This is what's going to make available in app.js the thing that is exported, the thing that is a part of module.exports in my module. Okay? So now that I've got that inside of format nm, then I can go ahead and use that function. But I use it with this variable. Not with format name, this variable. It's this variable that now gives me access to what was exported from the module, names.js. Okay? So let's create a new name here. Just set up a new variable, new name, and we're going to set that equal to format nm. That's going to give us access to that. And then we can log to the console, new name, like that. Save that. Now let's just go ahead and give that a try. Node app. There we go. In app.js, I get the console log statement from app.js, and then I get the name formatted properly. Because now that function is available in app.js using this variable. Because we exported it using module.exports, we said this is going to be public. We're going to make this public outside of this module. And then we assigned it to this variable using the require command. And then we can use that function anytime we want with this variable. So that's how modules work. There's a little bit more to them, and we'll cover those things in a later tutorial. For example, how do we make multiple things available? We'll look at that in a later tutorial. The goal here is to get you familiar with modules and get you using modules inside of Node, as they're a critical part of the Node application. All right, now before we're done here, please hit the like button. It can help others on YouTube find this tutorial. If you want to dive deeply into JavaScript, I've provided discount links to all my courses in the description section, including a course on regular expressions. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can hit that subscribe button or click the circle link on the left, the one with my face. I release a new tutorial each week. You can also click the video link in the center to access another tutorial right away, or click the link on the right to visit my website, allthingsjavascript.com, for a complete list of tutorials and other resources. Thanks for watching.